Welcome back to another episode of the Sports Card Dad. It's another 20 minutes with, and we've added a superstar to the lineup here, kind of last second, Chris HOJ, one of the founders of Card Ladder. Chris has been kind of one of these guys behind the scenes on the content side, but I was very happy to see here over the last few months, things are changing, and all of a sudden the HOJ is emerging like Godzilla out of the deep ocean to make more hobby content. What's going on, Chris?
Great to be here. Want to send a shout out to some of the guys I actually watch your show with, Big W, HB, and GC. We all really get a great enjoyment on watching your show. I mean, the hobby content, man, it's in a great place. Love what you're doing. Love what you're doing with Dennis. Love the content that you're putting out here. I'm a voracious consumer of it. I'll leave a comment once in a while if something really fires me up, but I'm always listening. It's great background noise if I'm taking a walk or something or working, but sometimes something will happen that I'll have to stop and say, what did he just say? Like, did he just pick up an 86 Fleer to go with this 84 Star? Like, that's awesome. Let me just acknowledge that. So yeah, man, it's great. The content landscape is amazing. I think there's so many interesting commentators right now saying things that are improving and evolving the way I'm thinking about collecting, the way I'm thinking about the market, the way I'm thinking about the industry. It's a nice time. It's a nice time to be a consumer of hobby content.
Absolutely. Yeah. I was at the National and I realized I got to see a lot of people, but you're an example of somebody I wanted to run into and have a quick chat with, and I did. And I was like, man, maybe I should shuffle around my content a little bit and start doing some more kind of interview type stuff. And this is a way that I can just keep in touch with people every 30, 45 days, because whether it's you or Brian Gray or, Jeff Wilson or whoever it is, I got Ty Wilson coming up here. A lot of industry folks, people in the weeds that are also collectors and also can kind of shed light on industry stuff too when it does pop up. And so I thought it was great. Now, so I noticed for you, the crossover show, I always miss this because I don't have an IG, I don't have IG Premium or whatever that's called. So if I go outside of IG, I can't watch the show, but I do have YouTube Premium. So kind of like what you were saying, like I could be mowing the grass and I can, have it in my pocket like a podcast almost, and I can listen to it. So I was really happy to see you guys shifted over to YouTube. And then I also noticed on Saturday nights, you're now with Jeremy, it looks like every single week, or at least most weeks. And then I saw that you're also doing kind of a singular podcast as well, a YouTube show that's more long form. So what prompted the move to kind of get into the game? Because you're the House of Jordans going back in time. So you're not a stranger to it, but it seems like you kind of took a little bit of a break.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, the House of Jordans just sort of unceremoniously ended when we launched Card Ladder. So that was like, everything, every waking second was Card Ladder oriented, but the crossover was always the staple there. Like we launched that around April of 2020. And that was like, honestly, some mix of like, a content variety show, but also a chance for people who had questions about the product or questions about us as collectors or how our collecting intersects with the product to ask them, and we could talk about them and have fun. And really during the depths of the pandemic, we would be on Friday night and we'd be going like 3 or 4 hours, and it was actually insane. But now the crossover, we professionalized a bit. I mean, if you look at some of the podcast reviews for the crossover, the most common comment that you'll see like on Apple Podcasts is that the audio is terrible. Somebody said that the audio of the crossover is the worst audio of any podcast they'd ever heard. So eventually we had to like get off of Instagram, right? Like eventually we had to like get some mics going, maybe get a little ring light or something, just come out of the cellar and into the light. And so we did. And that was also at my brother's urge, at his insistence. Like he's our chief content officer. He was always like, dude, I have to do a ton of work to get this Instagram audio to sound good. Why don't you guys get mics and go over to YouTube? And so we did. And it's been a nice change, man. Like people are like, oh, that's what you guys sound like when there's not all this room echo and decent microphone capturing you. So, but the crossover's always been there. We cleaned it up and polished it up a bit. Jeremy graciously offered me to come on at the tail end of the show and talk a bit, and I will blab until I'm forced to stop. I have that problem, I guess. So he just kind of tucks me in at the end and lets me go. And then finally I still had more things to say. Like I still wanted to say things about, but like my little YouTube channel is just really about what I'm doing as a collector mostly. That's or like if I have things to say that we didn't get a chance to say in the crossover, then I'll chime in there. But yeah, I mean, I'm very grateful that I get the chance to say stuff, and a few people care enough to listen to it.
Yeah, well, one thing I was telling you offline is there's definitely a lot of education when it comes to vintage cards on YouTube, especially. There's a lot of great YouTube vintage collectors that share great insights on different player cards and different sets and that sort of thing. But there seems to be what's missing, I think, is just more of that modern education around, different one-of-ones and why you're collecting. And I would consider you an advanced modern collector, and so that's not easy to find, frankly. I mean, if we're being honest, I mean, a lot of folks in the modern space, I don't want to generalize, but they're just getting in, they're buying, selling, they're flipping, and that's perfectly okay. Or you're collecting certain players, but you're trying to kind of figure it all out. And you would kind of offer some insights there that I think are really good. So that show has been great. Now at Card Ladder, you are spent all day, your whole life is data, tracking online sales, reports on new records for particular cards. And we'll call it a bull market, I guess. We use a stock market term. But I mean, do you feel like, we're seeing a lot of public facing sales that you guys are tracking very easily. But to me, I kind of wonder behind the scenes, are there a lot of huge private sales? And one example here is Nick Boston Card Hunter, shout out on IG. He had bought really cool card. It's the 84 Star 101, and it was signed. He bought it ungraded and then took it to PSA at the National, like gutsy. I was like, oh my God, he bought this ungraded, and it graded out. And then he ended up recently, he sold it, and he made mention that like, hey, look, this is a private sale. The buyer seller, they don't want to, it's not going to be a Card Ladder comp. There's not going to be a comp there. And it just got the wheel spinning, man. There's always been private sales going on that are probably decent sized sales, but nowadays with all the money flying around, I have to assume there's stuff that maybe you hear about, or maybe it's kind of like, yeah, we're working on a deal and it never comes to you because it's a private sale. What are your thoughts there?
This is a terrific topic, and I want to congratulate Nick on that. I mean, to spot that card in the wild, to grade it. I mean, and just that autographed copies of the 84 Star. There are so few of them. They are highly coveted by collectors, and I just want to send a shout out to him. That's an amazing move that he made there. And he's also exactly right, and you're exactly right, that there are lots of activities, lots of transactions happening that are not being publicly disclosed. And they're happening at all different types of levels. They're happening at the collector to collector level. They're happening as the byproduct of brokering services, whether it's by an independent company or by a larger marketplace or an auction house. There's deals happening where shop owners or card show organizers are facilitating meetups, or there's vault to vault transactions. There's trades. There's so many things that are happening that are not brought into the public light, either because the parties prefer to remain private, and I'm an advocate of privacy and the right to privacy, and I think people who want to keep things private certainly should be able to do that, or just because the mechanism isn't quite there, that this is just a sale that happened over here, and people aren't really aware of the means of verifying private sales that do exist in the hobby now. And they're perfectly content to keep it over there. But whatever the reason is, it certainly is true that there is a whole other silo of deal making that's happening that is not being captured in any of these numbers that we see on the screens of the hobby. So like Card Ladder's industry tab, right? Like we just published the results for the monthly online transaction volume for August, and right now it's at 421 million, and it might still go up a little bit more as we continue to gather the final confirmations of paid status from certain marketplaces from the month of August. So that's a number that's huge, but it's only capturing a sliver. A sliver is a bit small, but it's only capturing a slice. It's not capturing people doing retail purchases through like Dave and Adams or Blowout Cards. We're capturing none of that activity. We're not capturing any of the activity that happens at a card show, on the floor of a card show, like the National. We're not capturing any of the activity that happens in a card shop from the dealer to the individual. And we're not capturing any of these private deals unless they either submit them to us to get them verified and logged, which is an arduous process. You have to submit a lot of different things to be able to get a private sale verified and logged. Our scrutiny for verifying and logging that is even stronger than for a public sale. But some people do that, but most, obviously the vast majority don't. And then sometimes an auction house, like Golden or something, they'll publish a sale. They'll say, look, we brokered this private sale, we're making it public, we're putting our stamp on it, we're releasing this information. But there's and then of course breaking and online shopping and live shopping, there's so many other categories of activity that are not captured in that monthly volume number. I think Spinatron was musing on Twitter yesterday or the day before that all things considered, the month of August possibly could have been in excess of $1 billion in revenue for the trading or the purchasing and buying and selling of single sports cards and sealed wax, and also trading cards too. Pokemon is a big chunk of that. TCG is a big chunk of that, and he might be right. A billion is not out of the question given what the online number was.
Yeah. No, absolutely. What does your gut say or tell you, I guess, about this market where we are in 2025 versus 2021? We were talking off screen about just how, it feels like another lifetime ago, 4 or 5 years ago, when we all I got started in March of 2020, basically when the pandemic hit. As far as content is concerned, I started collecting in 2018, kind of getting back into it, getting my feet wet. But this market is different in the sense that people are not spending $2,000 on base Luka Prism PSA 10s. However, do you still feel like maybe some things are overhyped, or there maybe, some particular player cards are just kind of going ballistic based off of hype or based off of whatever? It's always this is a tricky thing because we never really know exactly where demand comes from for certain things. I mean, if we look at like Michael Jordan or Pokemon or Babe Ruth, we have an idea, okay, these are goats of their, or pop culture phenomenons or whatever. So you have an idea of where that demand comes from, but it's not always so cut and dry. And then which cards of those players and which cards of those characters. And, what is your take on this market versus 2021?
Oh, I really like the timeline that you sketched there, and I'll be curious to see what you think about this because you and I lived through it simultaneously. I find that this market that we're in right now reminds me a little bit of the structure of the 2020 market. So the 2020 market being the market that was sort of born of the stay-at-home orders, born of the Last Dance documentary, born of the suspension of professional sports, and then they all sort of started resuming. Just it was very, very speculative, and it was very driven by almost boredom. It was almost driven by just the need for activity. And I look at this current landscape, and this is just my point of view, but it feels like it's been a really long off season for the NBA and the NFL and the NHL. It feels like it's been a really long summer. It feels like there was just so much energy and activity and pent up desire to make deals that showed itself at the National, and then that momentum continued on into August. Lots of different asset classes are peaking or have peaked very recently, whether we're looking at something more traditional like the S&P 500, or we're looking at the price of, leading indicator cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, or we're even looking at like gold and things all these things are at all-time highs. And also there's the devaluation, the constant devaluation of the US dollar that has to be factored into this as well. And it just feels like there's a lot of energy, there's a lot of momentum right now. But in 2020, something interesting happened. The market really pulled back in the late fall and early winter months. So November, December, January, the market really retracted. And my theory to why that is, and this isn't a theory that's novel to me, but I couldn't credit any one person with coming up with it, but I've certainly heard it before, and then I've adopted it. And that idea is that when the major sports all sort of take center stage at the same time. So we'll have the MLB playoffs and the World Series. We'll have the resumption of the NHL season. We'll have the resumption of the NBA season and the resumption, or really the midpoint of the NFL season. When all those things are all going on at once, that seems to take up a lot of people's screen time, a lot of people's attention. Time that maybe would be spent browsing eBay is now sort of spent setting a fantasy football lineup or watching games and stuff. And I think that there's very natural breath. The market takes a breath. The market just sort of breathe, exhales. It relaxes for a little while as sort of we come down from the high of all this transacting and volume and all these high prices. And so I think that the resumption of the professional sports, I think it could have a factor here again too, if this is truly like 2020, because it does kind of feel to me like it is. But here's the punchline. After the market settled down and cooled off in the early winter months of 2020, then in January and February, the market went to a level that I don't think anybody saw it happening. The market went nuts. That was the dead around that late January, early February time was when Golden sold those 2 Michael Jordan 1986 Fleer PSA 10 cards for $720,000, like that. So there was like that calm that happened in that winter was preceding the storm, which would follow. And I wouldn't be shocked if we had a similar pattern where we had this really high energy, then we calm down for a little bit, and then right around the start of the new year, Q1 of 2026, we see another like really big burst of excitement in the market.
Yeah, I agree. That's actually good. Just taking it back a little bit further to 2020. I like how you did that as opposed to just 2021. For me, it kind of feels like, and you mentioned kind of everything's expensive, and if we look at kind of like where was the S&P just a short 5 years ago, going back to 2020, and then I think about real estate prices, and then I think about crypto, and then I think about all these things. I think the big money is maybe taking some money off the table, whether it's stocks or crypto, and I just think they have a lot to spend, and so I think it means that the higher end is just getting a nice little push up, just because there are folks that are like, you know what, $500,000 is like, but I think what's different though is I think they look at it in the same way that Kevin O'Leary bought this card with Shine and those guys, as more of just a store of value. Like he explained it, like I look at this as Bitcoin or whatever. So if they're lumping it in with, whatever their Apple stock or their Bitcoin or whatever they consider the kind of just a buy and hold, whatever that is for them, then maybe this is kind of a new destination for the ultra wealthy, I would call them, to just park some money into. And, obviously that doesn't go all the way down the line to base cards and that sort of a thing. But it is interesting though, because we haven't really seen it at this level. Other than, I would say, though, we did have the fractional share companies that came in and they bought big things and then they fractionalized them out. Well, is this like 2.0 of that, where they're going to kind of take these things and then look to kind of monetize? Or is it truly hey, we're vaulting this thing and it's a $40 million Pollock and we're going to vault it and we're going to sit on it and just over time we're going to let it appreciate? Is that the thought? And I guess that'll all play itself out, however it's going to go.
I think they're trying to have their cake and eat it too. I think they wanted to appreciate like the highest end collectible pieces of art, and they want to be able to build a business on the back of it, whether it's through fractionalization or some other, or like the company Secure, which they've announced, but the thing, and so we'll see how that plays out. I certainly think we're gonna if this bull market continues for another half year or more, or we see another retraction and then a surge, we're gonna see another proliferation of hobby businesses just like we did then. And so we'll see how that landscape shapes up.
All right, so let's shift over. This is something I've always wondered with you, because you are, I would consider, a high-end collector, but it's not necessarily all about just buying expensive cards, because you collect Michael Jordan, but you also collect the Joker, and you also collect Christian McCaffrey. So, I mean, McCaffrey one-of-ones are not the same price as Michael Jordan one-of-ones, obviously. But recently, you made a move where you moved a bunch of rare Michael Jordan cards into one huge Michael Jordan card. And so it made me think, I guess, on the back of what we were just talking about, as far as just taking value into account. And I know you're not necessarily buying because you're looking to flip next week, but I think all of us to some degree think about, hey, we're putting significant money into something. You're thinking about value in the long run and want to make kind of smart moves there. It's a combination. I'm assuming, maybe I'm putting words in your mouth, but I'm assuming that there's a combo of, I want to collect great cards the way I want to, and also I want to be smart about, values and that sort of a thing, taking that into account. So with the MJ market in particular, the way you consolidate into that one, have you gotten to a point where there might be only like a handful of Michael Jordan cards you would make a play on? Or, and I know this could be different for McCaffrey and some of these other guys, but just for Jordan in particular, is it down to a few cards or one? Or, how are you collecting Jordan these days?
My Michael, it's such an interesting question, and my answer is going to be weird, but I think it will make sense after I explain it all. I have more Michael Jordan cards in my collection right now than I've had in years. So like the actual quantity of cards has increased. I have around,
even after that trade.
Exactly. But here's why. So and for the record, and in that trade, I went from I had a card called the 1998-99 Molten Metal Fusion Titanium Michael Jordan, which is numbered to 40. And I traded that one card and I took back 7. I took back the 1997-98 Upper Deck Power Deck 1-of-1, and 6 other one of ones from 98, 99, and 99, 2000. So I actually turned 1 card out of 40 into 7 one of ones. And this connects back to McCaffrey collecting. Like, you and I are kindred spirits because you collect the player who's also from that draft class, Alvin Kamara. And those guys have had similar careers. You know, they're both top fantasy picks perennially, and they're both really exciting players to watch. I have Kamara on at least one of my fantasy teams this year, maybe even 2. I thought he was a nice value pickup possibly. But you know, we have a trajectory, and like anytime you talk about Kamara cards, I always perk up. And I think I've left a few comments about Kamara cards before too, like when that Black Finite showed up and then it resurfaced again later. I'm always interested.
Real quick, I'm just going to insert a story there. So Brent put that up for auction, the deep value investor guy. Okay, so this is going back like a year and a half, and he messaged me. I think he eBayed it. Maybe this is before he was working at Fanatics, so it was a couple of years ago, maybe. But he put it up, and he's like, "Hey, just wanted to like give you a heads up." You know, I put it up, and so and this is at a point where I was dumb, and I should have made more of a move on it, but I bid like $1,600 for it. And that was at a time where I was like, I like Kamara, but I'm still like, I'm more of a Breeze guy, but you know, and now I'm like, damn it, I should have just bought it. But anyway, so it ended at $2,500, and then they didn't pay for it. Like, it was a non-paying auction. And so then it just went back to Brent, and he held it. I think he held it for another 6 months or 8 months. And then I probably got double or something or whatever of that. I don't know what he ended up selling it for, but I was in the game on that initial auction, and then I lost it. So anyway, I just had to insert that, but go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, well, that's just a great example of how, like, in cards, sometimes we just stumble into success. I mean, he definitely had the foresight to pick up a great card, but he was also very fortunate that there was a non-paying bidder, and then that forced him to keep the card for longer, and then the market grew, and all of a sudden it's worth like 3 times what it would have gone for had that guy just paid. Yep. So, but that's a great card, and so my McCaffrey collecting actually turned out to inform my renewed approach to Michael Jordan. So, like with McCaffrey, at one point I had like hundreds or a lot, like definitely a 3-figure amount of McCaffrey cards, and they were all these different one of ones and golds out of 10 and stuff from like tons of just random products, random years. And eventually, I started feeling like this collection was a bit bloated, and I wanted to lean it up, to make it a little more lean. And then that just so happened to coincide with so McCaffrey was having like the best season of his career 2 years ago. He would go on to win Offensive Player of the Year. And whoever the person was who owned his National Treasure Shield autograph one of one saw that as his great season was unfolding and sent it to Golden. And so I realized, you know what do I want to have like 100 kind of lower McCaffrey cards, or do I want to consolidate them into this one? And I decided I want to consolidate them. So, you know, I had like some McCaffrey NTRPAs out of 99. Like I had like a PSA 10, which is a really cool card. But I took that whole pile and I basically turned it into just this one McCaffrey Shield autograph one of one. And then my McCaffrey collection is like 13 cards or so. It's his NT one of one. And then it's his Prism Black Finite one of one. And then I actually have the full run of his Prism Black Finite base cards, which there's 8 of them. So I have all 8. And now I'm just nervously waiting for the final season of Prism Football to come out, and hopefully I can get his final Prism Black Finite too. So like I have that run. I really like that. I have the NT. And then I have his Contenders Super Bowl ticket one of one, the vertical and the horizontal from his rookie season. And then I'm working on completing his Select Black run from his rookie year. I have the concourse and the premier level. I just need to get the court side. So that's my whole McCaffrey collection. Nice. Right? It's just those 13 or so cards. And then I had taken a break from Michael Jordan collecting for like half a decade. And then I was collecting guys like McCaffrey. And then I went back to sort of looking at Michael Jordan cards again. And I was like, you know what? Like, I think I had it all wrong the way I was doing it before. I was like, I want to get like his one of ones. Like this is a fun way to collect. And then when I started looking at his one of ones, I was like, these are dirt cheap compared to what. That's how I was able to trade a card out of 40 from 1998-99, which is, to be fair, it's an iconic, beautiful, very in demand card. It's regarded as one of his very best. But I was able to trade that for his first ever Upper Deck one of one, and actually the first one of one that Upper Deck ever made for any player of any sport. And it just so happens to have Jordan. I was able to get that and 6 more one of ones from the 90s. So to me, I was like, I'm reshaping my Michael Jordan collection now, sort of around these super rare cards that I really came to get an appetite for from collecting Christian McCaffrey. And so as a result, you know, I've taken a few of those like really, really big iconic 90s Jordan cards that I owned for 5, 6, 7 years. I've turned them into smaller price wise one of ones. And so that's how that Jordan collection went from being about 10, 11 cards to now it's like 30 to 35.
Oh, that's cool. Okay. Is this one way for you to kind of shield yourself against, the whether it's Panini or whoever it is, Topps, Upper Deck, from just coming out with more and more parallels? Is this almost kind of like, well, they can come out with more parallels, but I'm always going to be searching for one of ones. Now, I know they're making more one of ones too, so you might have to get picky on what one of ones you want, but
Exactly.
is that part of the thinking?
It's part of it. Yeah, I definitely, my appetite for rarity continues to increase. But the thing that also is key is that the price makes sense too. If the price was running away, or if it was just, if it was out of my budget, then what can I do? But in the case of 90s one of ones, and especially for Michael Jordan, Michael Jordan has 72 one of ones from 1997-98, which has 7, and 1998-99, which has 65. He has 72. That's it.
Wow.
That's technically the 90s is the season from 89-90 through 98-99. That's a decade. Michael Jordan has 72. That's it. Those are his first 72. Those will always only be his first 72 one of ones. I have like 15 or 20 of them now. To me, those cards are so appealing. I just think they're such fun, interesting cards. And one of ones are like, they're not really cherished in the 90s. Like us ultra modern guys who are more focused on like, McCaffrey, Kamara, guys like that. Like we love the one of ones, but the 90s guys, they're not so into them. They're into, the rubies out of 50, the PMG, whether it's the red out of 90 or the green out of 10 or the championship out of 50. They're into stuff like that, the credentials, etc. And so to me, there's just like this really fun collecting lane in the 90s where there's these amazing and obviously very rare cards. And they're true one of ones. Like these aren't one of ones that actually have 4 different one of ones or something. All these are just the only one of one parallel to the card. So it's been a really fun experiment, sort of dabbling into these 90s one of ones and seeing how far I can get.
So you're zagging basically, because before you, honestly, and this is going to sound so lame, I feel like, is before you brought up these cards, I didn't know that they existed, because all you ever hear about are the rubies or the essential credentials or the PMGs or whatever it is. Like I feel like that is on just like on a, on a reel, just always going. Everyone's always talking about those, but and I guess that's maybe another example of, if it's not, what's hobby relevant, and sometimes it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, and so I guess it's probably a smart zag. So for you, it's like, for what you're saying is, for the price point and the rarity, it's just like a no-brainer.
That's how I see it. Yeah, and especially because I have some equity built up in Michael Jordan collecting, and I'm not completely bailing on his big, iconic, highly coveted parallels. Like I still have his PMG red, I still have his golden boss refractor out of 74 from Finest. Like I still have his 98 classic 61 from Fleer Tradition. I still have both of his Stadium Club one of a kinds, which are numbered to 150. Like those are very well known, highly visible cards. Yeah. And the stuff that I'm dabbling in is their obscurities. Like it's exactly like you said. Like there's no spotlight on these. Nobody's talking about these. These are ghost cards. Nobody sees them. Nobody hears of them. I've had to procure these cards from Asia and from Europe and from Australia, and I had to send a courier over. Brian from Ship My Cards. Great guy. He provides the service where you can pay him and he'll go overseas, he'll go over to Europe and or go over to China or something and pick up cards for you and bring them back. And that's what a lot of these people who had these cards, they wanted that. They're demanding that. They're like, I don't want to ship these. I'm worried about customs. I'm worried about everything. You have to come over here and get the cards. And so I've sent Brian over there once. I'm probably going to send him back over there again. That's the level of obscurity that we're dealing with here. So, and I'm not trying to disrupt the market. Like I'm not trying to say that these are better. I'm not trying to say that at all. These are obscurities that, after collecting ultra modern for like half a decade and like doing the McCaffrey thing and stuff, when I went back to Jordan, these are just the ones that jumped out to me. I was like, the earliest Jordan one of ones, so that's pretty appealing.
Yeah, I'm going to show. I don't have tons of one-on-ones, but I do have a Stranger Things card that is. It's the Hopper Gold Auto one of one, and this makes me think about like something that you would collect. I know you're not necessarily like a huge auto guy, but for Stranger Things cards, the thing that's really funny about those is nobody collects them except for me and like 5 other people, which is fantastic, because then it's like when something pops up, I'm not competing with, I'm not competing with 10,000 people. So anyway, there's me awesome. And like the 5 other guys. Like I knew who had this. Aaron at Slab Stocks, I believe, had this first. Then he sold it to another guy, and he had it on eBay for like $85,000 OBO, of course, because there's only one, And then finally, he gave in and he's like, hey, just to let you know, I'm going to run this at auction, like starting Sunday, I'm like, thank God, finally. So I was waiting.
Dude, that card is sick.
And it sold for way less than 85 grand, but it worked out. He had to do work on his house or whatever. So it worked out fine. But that's the extent of my one-on-one collecting for right now. Is that's how far down the line I've got to go. I have to go outside of sports to afford the one-on-one, but
dude, well, that's one of the greatest thrills for me as a collector is like, it's 2 a.m. and I'm looking at checklists on trading card database and I'm like, holy crap, I didn't know this card existed. And then I'll like go on eBay or I'll start doing some sales research. And then all of a sudden I'm like down this rabbit hole of finding these really cool cards. Like one set that has like just jumped out at me as I was compiling some one of my Michael Jordan checklists, one of the cards that just like jumped out was this, I think it's 2008-09 Upper Deck MVP. That's the name of the product. And then it has this parallel called the Superscript parallel. It's a 1-of-1. And it's just, these cards are beautiful. And like the Jordan's never been seen. I'll probably never see it. I'll probably never find it. But I ended up looking at like these other ones of these other players. Like I think Dirk has a recent sale of one. Some other guys have some recent sale of ones. They're very, very affordable. Just a couple $100. And the thing that makes the card so beautiful is like the cards are already this like really interesting, strong green color, and then some of the other ones are black. And then the Superscript 1-of-1 parallel is a facsimile autograph, but the autograph is in this holographic foil. So the autograph the facsimile autograph just shines, and it just looks like somebody like splashed this holographic paint sort of on the card because it's like an autograph, so it's not perfectly symmetrical. It's just really beautiful cards, and I was like, I never encountered this set. I never heard of these before. It was just like late one night I was doing some Jordan checklist research and I came across this set. I was like, man, these cards look awesome. Like that discovery moment when you stumble into something you've never seen before. I love that. I live for that.
Yeah, that's one of the pros, I feel like, when people knock against manufactured scarcity. So the one really cool thing about manufactured scarcity is, especially as those things age, is they get lost in time. Like if they never emerge or they're put in a collection, if it's out of 10 or if it's a 1-of-1 or whatever, or maybe it's not even numbered, but it's on a checklist, but you've never seen one before, or you've seen one in your life. That's kind of a fun thing that as it ages, like, is that thing ever going to show up ever? That's a fun part of manufactured scarcity.
Fun, and it's stressful, and it's like,
especially when it hits auction and you're like, oh my God, I have to take out a second mortgage.
Exactly. But yeah, it does. You get that needle in the haystack sensation when you've known about something for a few years or something, and then like, boom, then it finally shows up. That saved search on eBay finally gets that little blue dot, and like your heart just races. That makes me feel alive. I love that.
Absolutely. All right. Well, we've got to wrap. We're at 32 minutes. My 20 minutes we almost have 2 episodes. I could turn this into a twofer. No, I'm not going to do that. This is going to go out one time, but Chris will be back we're going to target every 30 to 45 days just to stay in touch. That's the point of these episodes, is so I can stay in touch with my friends. Last time I think I had Chris on was like 4 years ago, way too long. So Chris, thanks so much for coming on, buddy. I'm excited to see kind of this new content thing that you're doing all over the place. Where can people, what's the best way if they want to reach out to you, or I guess find you on YouTube? What's the best way to do that?
Just search out, if you want to find the Crossover podcast that's hosted on Card Ladder's YouTube channel. If you want to find my little rants that I do on my solo podcast, that's called the Chris HOJ cast. You can probably just Google that and get to it that way.
All right, man. Well, thanks again. We will see you in another 30 or 40 days.
Sounds good, man. Thanks for having me.